Hi, and welcome back to your summit. Your wait is over, postmenopausal women scaling back. And I'm your host, Jean Nitre, weight loss expert. And I've assembled several wonderful experts who can give us all sorts of practical information and to help you in your quest to lose weight. And so today I'm really honored to be speaking with Gwilda Wiyaka, and hi Gwilda, hi.
Hi, Jean.
And I say I'm really honored because wait till you hear her credentials. It's pretty amazing what she's contributed and what she's done in her life. So I'm gonna run through this. She's an expert in shamanism, just to get us going there. And she is considered to be today's foremost expert on the modern day application of ancient shamanic principles. She is the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a Colorado State certified occupational school of the shamanic arts, for which she has written the text curriculum. And Gwilda is also a preceptor for the University of Colorado School of Medicine, where she provides instruction to medical doctors on the modern interface between shamanism and allopathic medicine. How fascinating. And she has studied shamanism for over 40 years and has been practicing it for 30 years, and a teacher of the shamanic arts since 1996. Gwilda has recently released her latest book, The Science of Magic Book of Mysteries, Volume 1. And she's written some other books as well. And she's the host of a radio show or two, and you can access those at her website, findyourpathhome.com. That's where you can read more about her and hear some archived radio broadcasts. All right, Gwilda, so let's see. Why don't you tell us about how you got into shamanism? Is there a story there?
Well, actually, yes, there is. When I came into the world, I was fairly sensitive. You know, some people are more sensitive than others. I might have even been considered autistic in this day and age. But that was then exacerbated because I was in a family situation that was very volatile. And so my well-being depended upon my being able to sense when the people around me were getting riled up and give them wide berth. So basically, I turned the volume knob up on my sensitivity to where I was feeling other people's emotions very, very strongly, as if they were my own. Well, by the time I got into my 20s and was in college, I was really starting to fail because I didn't know whose feelings were mine and whose were theirs and what was going on. And I was in fight or flight all the time. My adrenals were fried. And I couldn't find the volume knob on the gift. And so fortunately for me, I ran into my first teacher at that point. He was a Lakota elder, and he took me under his wing. He and his wife did. And I studied with him for close to 7 years, six solid years before he crossed. And it made all the difference, but I still didn't feel like I had enough. So I went on my lifelong search of studying all sorts of different shamanic practices, Choctaw, Arapaho, Navajo, Celtic, Tibetan, core, trying to find out what is this really about and how can I manage what I am. And it's really saved my life.
Wow, fascinating. Okay, and we will get to how this relates to weight loss. So how does the shamanic component of women's health enter into weight loss?
There's 4 levels to a person. There's the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And in our society, we treat the physical. When that isn't working, we try to figure it out mentally. And then when that isn't working, well, we'll send them to a psychotherapist, which is really more mental than emotional, but some emotional. But the spiritual aspect is totally ignored. And the spiritual aspect, many people think of as esoteric or religious, and it's none of the above. The spiritual aspect, as we speak of it in shamanism, is actually where our energetic field interfaces with the quantum level. And the quantum level is where the push-pull of manifestation begins. This is just physics. So where we interface with the quantum level is where we start to manifest what shows up in our life. And if we've disconnected from some of our natural frequency expression at that level, we can't manifest it anymore. And so if we have an accident or we go through life, we get our bumps and bruises, and we go, we're hot wired to say, oh, I'll never do that again. That's why we survive as a species. But the problem is we usually make those decisions when we're young children. And young children don't have the big picture, or we're a traumatized adult. So we make a judgment about life and about ourselves that may not be accurate, but then we live under the rule of that particular judgment until it's rearranged. So that's the spiritual aspect that we start disconnecting from, and it really limits what we can manifest in our lives, and it also dictates what we are manifesting in our lives. So if we can go there to find out where it's beginning, it can make all the difference where it manifests.
So where the beginning of weight gain is one thing that you look at?
Yes, women's health, weight gain, patterns, issues, traumas, reoccurring patterns in our life, relationship stuff that just keeps happening no matter what. And the common denominator is us, even though the people change, the faces change, that sort of thing. Weight gain is really big in there.
Mm-hmm. And so is a large part of what you do, is it talk therapy, or is there a hands-on component?
No, and no. I do speak to my people because, if you go to a dentist, you know what's going to happen. If you go to a shaman, you're not sure, right? Because it's been not been in our society for a long time. But basically, so I explain it, and we talk about how you integrate it and this and that. But basically, what shaman are is frequency masters. My job is to go to the quantum level of this person's being, find where they've disconnected from their natural expression, and attune them back to that frequency so that they can then manifest that particular thing in their life. And it's based on what they're chasing down. In other words, if they've got this relationship issue that's the big deal for them, well, then that's what we go in on. And I use what's called the shamanic journey trance. It's common to all practices across the globe. And this practice is like between 50 and 60,000 years old. So it's amazingly sound. I use a shamanic journey trance, which is an altered state of consciousness, which allows me to access metaphorical information that represents what's going on at the quantum level of life. Through that information, then I'm able to find where the person's disconnected and reconnect them. Then they have to integrate it through the mental, emotional, and physical, but it does manifest after that.
Fascinating. Cool. Well, and so how are the beliefs about our body locked into our DNA? Let's talk about that.
That's a good one, isn't it? We've been programmed with belief systems for generations at this point. And we've been in a time, if we look at the galactic ages, where it's been a patriarchal dominated society for quite some time. And it's not about the men, it's just the energy. That's what this portion of the galaxy supports, is the masculine imbalance, or, the positive charge imbalance, which is put women subject to, okay? And the belief systems that go around that happen to be, if you're beyond childbearing age, you have no value. Because if, let's think back to the, not all that long ago, a woman's worth was in her dowry and bearing of children and heirs. Once she was done with that, she's locked in the tower, and the mistresses entertained the husband. That imbalance, if you will, has been gone on for so many generations that it actually, think of it at the quantum level. The women of the time lost their right to have any value past a certain age. That became the frequency they carried because they'd disconnected from the other frequencies to survive. That's what they passed down to their children. And it's passed down through the genetic line, through the feminine genetic line, if it's a feminine issue. And it actually resides in the DNA.
And so does your work shift the DNA?
Yes, it actually can. Because if we think about DNA, it's simply a light signature. It's a light frequency signature. We talk, they talk about junk DNA. Well, God don't make no junk, right? So the DNA is a light signature that is subject to our belief systems and the things that we're living in our life and our damage. If we bring in the frequencies that have been disconnected, it reactivates those aspects of the DNA. And what's interesting is then we pass down that correction to our children.
The sins of the father are visited on the sons and
Exactly. Until the seventh generation. I mean, this is what all those sayings was about. And we're just now coming into a time where we're going to really start to recognize what people were trying to say back then.
And didn't some of the Native Americans, if not all of them, say, whenever they were considering making a choice or something that would impact their their culture? How would this impact 7 generations?
Exactly, up until beyond the 7th generation. Every word you utter, every thought you think affects to the 7th generation and beyond. That's pretty much the carte blanche belief system, and I subscribe to that belief.
Yeah, wow, interesting. Okay, so why do we become what we fear? A lot of people say that, and I think you agree with that statement. How does that work?
Well, I like to tell this story. When I was a young girl, I had never learned to ride a bike because I lived out in the country with my father. When I moved to live with my mother and stepfather, we were in Saudi Arabia, and people rode bikes around the encampment. And the streets were wide and open, and mostly it was pretty safe to do so. There were a few cars, but not that many. They all had to be imported. And it was an American encampment. It wasn't like the major city or anything. And so they bought me this bike that was well too large for me, and I'd never ridden before. My mother wanted me to ride with her. So I get on the bike and I'd see a parked car and I go, I don't want to hit that. I don't want to hit that. I don't want to hit that. And of course I was so focused on it, I'd run broadside into a parked car every time. I still to this day don't ride a bike. But that's exactly what we're doing. What we focus on, where we put our intention is what we're putting our energy into, and that's what we manifest. And if we have fear, fear really gets our attention because, again, we're hardwired to avoid the things that would be damaging. And fear originally was designed to let us know when we were getting in hot water. But now we have so much unprocessed fear as human beings that we actually manifest from our fears of things that aren't even clear and present. And that's what we're looking at.
Yeah. And so do you give people ways to get around that, or not let that be a factor so much in their lives?
Right. Again, through shamanic healing, what we do is if a person comes to me and they say, okay, this keeps reoccurring in my life. And I do a process that's called pattern tracing. And that's the part that might sound like talk therapy, but it's really not. What I'm doing is using my skill to track where this may have originated from. So I'll ask a few questions like, well, have you had issues with authority figures? What happens when you're under the influence of an authority figure? Does this reoccur? When is the first time you remembered that happening? So what we're doing is we're starting to track backwards so that they mentally start to get, oh, this has been a reoccurring theme in my life. This work runs off of their intention. So what that does is clarify their intention. I intend to get at whatever makes me feel fearful in the present that really has nothing to do with the present. And so then when I go into the journey trance, that's exactly where my journey is directed, as to where their intent is. And so then we're able to find a place where they lost their right not to be in danger around a particular situation and clarify the frequency adjustment there, and then it can manifest in their world. The correction can.
Okay, wow. And can this happen in one session with you?
Sometimes it can. It can be really amazing how it does. One time I had a gentleman sent to me by a doctor. I interface with a lot of medical doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists and et cetera. I've been interfacing with this doctor for, probably better than 20 years. When he sent me this guy, he was an aerospace engineer. And he had a lovely wife, 5 kids, had a great job, happy family kind of thing. And all of a sudden, he had not been the same since his brother died. In fact, he hadn't been able to sleep unmedicated, and he was in flight or flight all the time, and he was totally freaked out. And he was addicted to drugs at this point when he'd never had a problem, but just to sleep and to not have such anxiety. And so they kept trying and figuring out what it was. He'd gone to therapy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they sent him to me, and when I went into Journey, I saw him. It's like an interactive dream. And I saw him sitting in a darkened room on a chair in front of a bunch of equipment. And I could see the light of the equipment shining on his face, so I knew it was him. And all of a sudden, I saw this hand come around from behind, someone holding their hand over his mouth, and they gray taped him to his chair, and they gray taped his mouth shut. But unfortunately, they got his nose as well. And I watched him suffocate. And I'm going, this isn't possible. My client's sitting right here in front of me. This isn't possible. Well, I came back and I told him this, and his face just went white. He says, that was my twin brother. And he died when people came in. He was in a recording studio. He died when people came in to steal his equipment, not knowing he was there. And that night that he died, I woke up in the middle of the night in absolute terror, and I knew something was wrong with my brother, and I just had to wait for the phone call. When it came through, I wasn't surprised to know that he was dead. And I've been afraid ever since. I've been freaked out ever since. Well, come to find out, because they were so close, his brother's dying intent was to try to find help from his twin. And his twin then picked up the frequency of terror that his brother was carrying at the time of his death. My job was simply to remove that frequency from the brother, help it cross to the other side. One session, his life was totally changed. He got off the drugs, and I still get Christmas cards from them. That was over 15 years ago.
Wow, that's awesome.
So, yeah.
You do work remotely? People don't have to come to Colorado to work with you?
Exactly. I work worldwide via Skype or telephone in the telephone in the States or Canada, and Skype worldwide. And that's an exceptional story. A lot of people, we carry a lot of damage, and damage begets damage. And so sometimes it'll take numerous sessions, but it just depends on where a person wants to get. One session will make a difference.
Wow. Wow. Well, what can you tell us about your work and how it can help people who want to lose weight?
Well, I think to tell you that, I have to describe what I view from a shamanic standpoint as what creates the weight problem. So again, we have the 4 levels: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So spiritual, we've been talking about. Someplace along the line, whether in the DNA or wherever else, there's this programming that at a certain age, we start putting on weight, we start feeling unattractive, we start slowing down, we start aging. That's all programmed. It's not necessary. It's programmed. Okay? So that's at the spiritual level. It's programmed in there. And then as individuals, we start to have soul loss, we call it, where you disconnect from a natural expression of your youth, of your being slender, of your being in shape, of your feeling solid and confident about yourself. Because we're programmed by the system at large that this is what happens to women of our age. Okay? So that's the spiritual aspect. Then we have the mental aspect, and that's what do you believe is what you become. What you believe is what you create. And again, we're being programmed to believe this is what you can expect. This is what it looks like to age. This is what a woman of this age looks like. My mother was like that. My grandmother was like that. There go. It's going to be the same for me. What's going on in our society is follow the money. The food that we're eating is fake food. Shamanism speaks of sticking to nature. God made things the way he did for a reason, okay? Anytime you can get food that's as close to the way it was before man got their grubby little hands on it, the better off you're going to be. But instead, what are we doing? Oh, food's the enemy. Really? Food's the enemy. You have to eat less food. What happens when you eat less food? Well, your thyroid starts to slow down because your body goes, I'm going to starve to death. So you actually are defeating it. Diets make you fat. Diet food is fake food. It tricks the body. It makes you fat. Fat people aren't fat because they eat too much. They're fat because they're starving to death and they're full of toxicity. We store our toxicity in fat cells. If you look at even our youth, everybody's getting this weird, mushy stuff around the middle. Right. We didn't see that 20 years ago. For the last 11 years, they've been testing GMOs on us without our permission, without our knowledge. These have been taken out of their natural order. We can't digest them. We have to store them. Then add to that, what we start developing is what's called acquired allergies. When you can't digest something, when it's tricking the body can't absorb it. It can't digest it. And partially digest particles get into the bloodstream. The white blood cells see it as an enemy. They attack it. And then it's guilt by association. Even if you eat totally organic, non-GMO wheat, if you've had GMO wheat, the body says, enemy, and attacks it. So then you develop autoimmune stuff, and you also develop leaky gut. I would tell you that probably about 90% of the people that think they're fat are actually sick because of the fake food that they've been eating. We're being programmed by the food and drug. Where's the money? Diet food, diet drugs, how much money goes into that every year? Okay? It serves the system to keep us fat, slow, miserable, and subject to. If you want to lose weight, lose the diet, lose the fake food. Take care of your health and let your weight take care of itself.
Yeah, and so I think part of the message is we've got to be responsible for our health and our well-being and our shape. And we cannot rely on the commercial aspect that we have been, as well as the media. Media doesn't, I don't have television, but, I understand put out those important stories that really help people to get power back. And that's part of the reason of this series of interviews I'm doing. So let's see. So did we actually talk about what really makes us fat? Did we touch on that?
Well, that was where I was starting with what makes us fat is to start out with the quantum level conditioning that can be changed, that goes clear to our DNA, that can be changed. And then we talk about the mental level, the belief systems that are being programmed into us that can be changed. At the emotional level, we haven't talked about the emotion. We talked about the physical as to what the mechanism is that's starting to make us fat because of the food that we're eating isn't food anymore, okay? But let's talk about the emotional level. We have been sold a bill of goods as to what is beautiful, think about Marilyn Monroe. She weighed more than I do, okay, in her prime, and she was a beautiful woman. But then we came into the Twiggy era, and then we came into the overworking with weights era, and the models, the clothes racks that we're given as examples of what we should look like are bone thin. They aren't healthy.
Way different from, the typical woman.
Exactly. And so we base our emotional feelings about ourselves on these false images that are held up as this is what you want to look like if you're going to be attractive and successful. This is what you want to look like. We look at that, and the first emotion we feel is shame. Anytime we feel ashamed of ourselves, we feel shame. Shame is a very low frequency, and our body starts to shut down around it. It starts to close in on itself and pack on the pounds to protect ourselves from what we view as judgment coming in from the outside. Then let's say, okay, but there is judgment coming in from the outside, right? Whether our spouse looks at us and says, you just aren't the woman I married anymore, or it's the society at large. If you aren't shaped like this model, then fault is found. You find fault with yourself, others find fault with you. There's a shamanic component known as negative inundations. And these are created by negative thought forms, those coming from ourselves and those coming from others that are directed at us. It's a low frequency that compromises our body, it compromises our health, it compromises our metabolism, and we literally put on weight to protect ourselves from it. Mm-hmm. Scary stuff.
So I like to offer practical things that women can do. So is there something you can offer maybe to help us shift our perspective, like you were just talking about how we perceive our bodies? Is there something we can just do? It's probably a practice that we need to, get into doing for a while, or whatever you have there, Gwilda.
Right. Well, a good place to start is, what are you telling yourself? Start a journal. What are you saying to yourself on a daily basis? You get up, you take a shower, you put on your makeup, you put on your clothes, you get ready for work.
When we're putting our makeup on, looking in the mirror, right?
Yep, that'll do it. Okay.
And when I say to myself, more wrinkles, that no doubt is creating more wrinkles.
Exactly. And the thing of it is, of course, in my line of work, the more I look like a crone, the better it is, right? So that we're all good here. But who said wrinkles were unattractive? Mm-hmm. Who said that's not okay? Right. Of course, again, I'm steeped in this way of life, and I'm steeped in the way nature made us, but I go into a big city now, and I see these women that, God bless them, they've cut, and they've nipped, and they've tucked, and they've filled, and they've carved, and they all look like the Stepford wives.
Yeah.
It's like, is that attractive? Is that an individual? Is that what we're trying to be?
Well,
why?
It also makes the aging, process sort of like not acceptable.
Exactly.
Engaging in plastic surgery is one way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
the things that are coming in aging and even gaining some weight, it's where our bodies are healthier for it. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, like I said, there's healthy weight and there's unhealthy weight, but the weight that has been we've been exposed to since childhood as being a healthy weight, is not necessarily a healthy weight. Then there's unhealthy weight, which is the toxicity and the malabsorption and storing of toxins that I was talking about earlier. So there's two different kinds of weight. But who was it? I can't remember. It was Jaja, I think maybe said, there comes a time in a woman's life when she has to choose between her backside and her face. If we get too thin, we look like an old hide, right?
It sounds like Zsa Zsa Gabor, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. She was also the one that said, marriage? Why would I exchange the admiration of many men for the criticism of one? Good old Shasha. You gotta love her.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, she was really tapped into woman, in a
Yeah,
great,
yeah,
great
yeah,
way.
she was. Yeah.
Well, this has been really, really interesting. And I'd like you, Gwilda, to tell us what the free gift is that you're offering.
Oh, okay. Online access to my latest book, The Science of Magic, Book of Mysteries, Volume 1. And it's a collection of teachings that I give before each of my radio shows. And so there's also links in it to the radio shows if you want to listen to them. But it's like I said, my latest book, and it's free to you. And I hope you find enlightenment and comfort in it.
Yes, thank you.
Mm.
And again, I just want to tell our viewers your website address because it's a pretty juicy website. Findyourpathhome.com. That's where you can find out more about Gwilda Wiyaka. So thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure.
Jean, it's been my pleasure.
Excellent. And so viewers, look into your inbox tomorrow morning for more interviews. And we're signing off for now. Bye-bye all.